Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're taking a look at two legendary Shadow Pokemon teaming up in the Master League. And that is going to be the new Shadow Palkia and Shadow Groudon. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Sour Lemon, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, to have not just one, but two Shadow Legendaries fully maxed out to level 50, we are in for a real treat with these battles. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at this Shadow Legendary team-up in the Master League. Hopping to the first match, leading Zygarde into Shadow Rhyperior. This is actually a matchup that Shadow Rhyperior does win in the twos. This Zygarde is on Bulldoze. Bulldoze is a very bad move, but it does have a 50% chance at a one-stage defense drop. But if the defense drop does not come through, then my goodness, does Bulldoze feel exceedingly mediocre. Opponent is going to be firing off another Breaking Swipe, fishing for a debuff. The Zygarde is going to hang on and fire off another Bulldoze. This Bulldoze into Rhyperior does not do a lot. Rhyperior is going to fire off one final charge attack, and we will see a no-shield as Zygarde goes down. Zygarde very clearly the damage sponge on this team, taking the hits, so that way the glassy Shadow Legendaries in the back do not have to. Opponent sends in a Zacian into a Shadow Groudon, and if this is their best answer, this game is already over. Play Rough is going to be shielded. Shadow Precipice Blades is incoming. They have one shield remaining. They do not respect the damage. That's a one-hit KO. In the back is Dialga, and they're not even going to get to see the Palkia. Shadow Groudon on an absolute rampage. Precipice Blades is going to be shielded, farming up Shadow Groudon. And it's just going to get the full end game sweep. Iron Head is shielded. Precipice Blades is reached. And this is going to be good night, Dialga. That's a one-hit KO. And that is a good game. Hopping into the next match, Zygarde, of course, as always on the lead. Now leading into Primarina. If this is Charm, this is very bad. It is going to be Charm, and this team is ABA weak to Primarina. So this is going to put Sour Lemon in a very difficult position, forced to stay in because you can't bring a Palkia in. Bulldoze gets a debuff, but look at that damage. That damage is just so insignificant. Oh my goodness. Primarina fires off its energy. Disarming Voice does not knock out, and Zygarde able to make it to Bulldoze number 2. Second Bulldoze is going to land, able to get the Primarina low. In comes, oh my goodness, the opponent sends in a Kyogre into a Groudon, and they should not have done that because Palkia exists, and it absolutely shuts down Kyogre. Kyogre will go for a Thunder. Palkia can just farm all the way down now. Palkia is going to leave with so much energy, and this energy is actually going to threaten the Primarina. This is a Shadow Aquatail. Shadow Aquatail shielded up by the Primarina, and there's two more where that came from. This Shadow Palkia looking to take over this game. We're going to see a switch into Groudon. Groudon answered with a Veltal, and that's not what Groudon was hoping to see. Groudon is going to fire off the Fire Punch. Shadow Fire Punch is actually adding up here. Normally it does not hit very hard, but of course Fire Punch does do more damage now, and due to it being Shadow, it has extra damage there as well. And that's a third Fire Punch reached by the Groudon. That's going to KO a Veltal. Primarina is going to get the farm down, but Shadow Palkia gets its revenge on its hardest counter and takes the win. Zygarde versus a Duskmane Necrozma in the next match. Zygarde farming up and just going straight for the Bulldoze. Bulldoze, even though it's super effective, not going to hit particularly hard. Opponent is going to let that through. The opponent does get debuffed. We do see a free Dragon Tail come through as the opponent looks to connect with the hard-hitting Sunsteel Strike. Sunsteel Strike, incredibly impactful neutrally, and Bulldoze number 2 is reached. Duskmane is going to no-shield. Duskmane does have another move, though, and we will see another no-shield from the Zygarde. The whole point of the Zygarde is to tank the hits to set up these Shadow Legendaries in the back. In comes Primarina, and Groudon will hit the field. But look at the charms. Groudon is getting absolutely deleted by these charms. Groudon may need to go for some Fire Punch baits in this matchup. We now see Kyogre in the back, and oh my goodness, Shadow Palkia is feasting. Kyogre is a Pokemon that I'm not a particular fan of in the Master League, specifically because of how terrible its matchup is into Palkia. If you end up with Kyogre on Palkia, you just lose. Of course, every Pokemon is going to have its counter, but I prefer Pokemon that have more play into their counters. Something like a Zacian, where even in its bad matchups, Zacian is still going to be able to output some very nice damage. Speaking of damage, this is a Shadow Draco Meteor, double resisted, but it sure does not look it. Rocking that Primarina. Primarina shields up the Fire Punch, but there's another one locked and loaded on the Shadow Groudon. So the opponent was in a potentially okay spot, but hard switching in the Kyogre just let Palkia absolutely destroy them. We move to the next game, Zygarde versus Yveltal, and it looks like the moveset has actually changed on the Zygarde. So now we're on Crunch and Earthquake. So I imagine these battles were recorded over the course of several days, and this battler tried several movesets. They try and catch an Outrage onto Necrozma, but they end up catching a Crunch, and out comes Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon farming up quite a bit, going to commit an early shield as Duskmane is going to look to connect with an Outrage. Groudon over farming so much here. Groudon just cannot get the farm down by the narrowest of margins. Duskmane hangs on, makes an Iron Head, and that's some serious damage. In comes Ho-Oh, blind through the Fire Punch, which means the Incinerate did go through, but thankfully, Shadow Groudon hangs on, makes it to the Precipice Blades, and Precipice Blades is going to grab a shield from the opponent. Shadow Palkia honestly might get one-hit KO'd by a Brave Bird, and that would definitely not be ideal, so we are going to see the shield. They did farm up to a potential Sacred Fire. They are going to full send the Brave Bird. That's going to force them out into Yveltal, and Yveltal is now going to be hit with a Crunch. But Crunch does not do much of anything here. But the Yveltal shields, a crucial miscount from the opponent. They did not remember the residual energy. They tried and respect an Outrage, but that was not Outrage energy. And now Zygarde is going to make Crunch number 2. This Crunch is going to be getting that Yveltal very low. Back in comes the Palkia with the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to erase the rest of their energy, and now it's going to be a race. Palkia versus Ho-Oh, and it's a CMP tie, and Palkia gets there, making it to the Aqua Tail, knocking out the Ho-Oh, and that's as close of a game as you can possibly ask for. Oh my goodness. We move to the next match, Zygarde versus Kyogre. Of course, you have to be a bit worried seeing this lead, because if they're leading Kyogre, they should never have a Pokemon that is weak in the back to Palkia. So Palkia might be dead weight in this game. Opting for the Bulldoze right off the bat, I'm not a big fan of just going straight for the Bulldoze. Even if you do, at least build up to the Outrage to potentially try and threaten the shield, because Bulldoze is just such an incredibly poor move. We are going to see the Outrage. The opponent switches into a Dialga, but this is going to be very threatening there. That does some nice damage. Out comes Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon. Honestly, I don't know if a Shadow Fire Punch KOs here. This is going to be a test of the damage output, and it does not, but one Mud Shot after will. Opponent will be able to send it back in the Kyogre. Waterfalls are going to absolutely shred, but Kyogre is going to fire off energy, and they're already in Fire Punch range. So Groudon is going to commit the shield, go for the Fire Punch after one additional Mud Shot, and now the opponent has a choice. Are they going to protect Kyogre? They are not in the back. It's going to be Yveltal. Yveltal will be hit with a Fire Punch. If they no shield, this potentially sets up a farm down, and they do. Send in the Palkia, farm them all the way down. Palkia desperately trying to get this full farm down before the opponent can make it to a second Oblivion Wing. Oblivion Wing number 1 is going to be shielded. It's going to be a race, and Palkia gets the farm down. The opponent has 2 shields remaining, but unfortunately, they're going to lose with both those shields intact. Looks like that is now 2-0 in the set. Zygarde into Rhyperior. This is not the Shadow Rhyperior, which means it's a pretty bad matchup. The opponent safe switches into a Shadow Dragonite. Shadow Dragonite. Dragon Claw is survivable for the Zygarde. Zygarde more than happy to let that go. And in comes Shadow Palkia. Palkia able to get the farm down, denying the energy from the opponent. They're going to send in Florges, and Florges is going to be met with the Shadow Aqua Tail. Shadow Aqua Tail is going to connect. That does pretty substantial damage, and the immediate no-shield from Palkia, as it perfectly played to the CMP tie on the Disarming Voice. Now in comes Groudon. Opponent is going to send in Rhyperior. These Mud Slabs do add up. Shadow Groudon has serious damage, but in exchange, it's a lot glassier. Groudon farming up, going to go for a bait. A no shield here could potentially be costly. The opponent is going to commit the shield. There's a quick switch to Zygarde, and Zygarde does have a Bulldoze banked. Breaking Swipe will connect. Going to go for the Bulldoze. We know even if it's super effective, it's not going to do a ton of damage. Bulldoze is going to land. Opponent is going to switch, and back in comes Florges. Florges will get a big energy head start as it can look to farm all the way down. Bulldoze lands. We do see the defense drop from the Bulldoze, but Florges exits with so much energy. Groudon goes for the Fire Punch. Fire Punch will be able to deliver a knockout. The opponent says no. They commit the shield, and they're going to fire off energy. Shadow Groudon calling that it's going to be the disarming voice, and it is. Can Groudon potentially clutch? This is going to be close. We may need to see a farm down. There's a switch to Rhyperior. Rhyperior will be met with the Fire Punch, but the Groudon is just too low. The Rhyperior will be able to be knocked out here, but unfortunately the Florges was just much too healthy. That Florges in the back, being able to get that farm down on the Zygarde is one of the reasons why I'm not as big of a fan of Bulldoze. Is if you had Earthquake, you could at least threaten a shield, but with Bulldoze, you're unable to do so. Alright, we are already locked and loaded for the next match, leading into Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is going to farm up to a Sacred Fire bait, but could always just full send the Brave Bird. They're going to go for the Sacred Fire, and that's not going to do much of anything to the Zygarde. Zygarde, Outrage, solid damage. Opponent safe switches into Zacian, and Zacian will be met with the Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon farming up a ton of energy. Opponent will fire off a move, and Groudon commits an early shield as the Zacian goes for the close combat. Zacian going for close combat number 2. Groudon opting to no shield. Close combat does big damage, but now at -4, a Shadow Fire Punch might honestly KO from this health range. Opponent, they think it will. They do commit the shield. Groudon gets the double up on the Fire Punches, putting the opponent in a bit of a tricky position. They're just going to let it go. In comes the Ho-Oh, going to save energy on the Groudon and switch back into the Zygarde. I honestly really like this play. Brave Bird is going to connect. In the back is Dialga, and Dialga will immediately be hit with the super effective Bulldoze. Bulldoze is shielded, and they're going to be very sad they shielded that. The Groudon is close to the Precipice Blades, and it gets there. And we already know that's going to be a one-hit KO. Down goes Dialga. Ho-Oh gets the farm down, but Shadow Palkia is here to shut it down and just fully farm down before the opponent can even get to a move. We move to the next match. Zygarde into a Veltal. And as long as it's still running Outrage, this will be a good matchup. And it is. So it looks like it was just the one game in there where the Zygarde did have the different moveset. So the opponent, they're just going to spam out Oblivion Wings in this matchup. Zygarde very fine taking that damage and firing off the Outrage. If you are on the more standard Crunch plus Earthquake set, then you're just completely walled in this scenario. The Yveltal still actually does have some lose cons just because Zygarde's stat product is just absolutely busted. But with Outrage, it's a lot more convincing. You can land the Outrage, you can farm down, and exiting with energy is actually quite nice. Going to blind throw the Outrage. The opponent did actually come in with a Duskmane. Duskmane shields, and they are not going to be happy when they see this Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon hits the field of play. Groudon more than happy to respect a potential Sunsteel Strike from the opponent. And there it is, the Sunsteel Strike. It's Kyogre in the back, and Shadow Palkia is just feasting on the whales. Oh my goodness. Kyogre gonna farm up to the Thunder. Very easy shield for the Palkia, and Palkia just gets to farm all the way down. And this poor opponent is just in absolute shambles. They had to run the RPS whale, and they're getting punished by Palkia. Palkia goes for the Aqua Tail. That does substantial damage. Going for Aqua Tail number 2, and we see at the bottom right, the opponent just conceded the match, recognizing that that match was completely unrecoverable. Hopping into the final match, leading Zygarde into a shiny Dawn Wings. Dawn Wings, an incredibly cool pick. Of course, the opponent probably going to shield here to respect a Crunch, but this is not a Crunch. It's going to be a Bulldoze. Now the opponent knows that this Zygarde does not have Crunch, so they're a lot less fearful of the charge moves going forward. Moongeist Beam is going to land. That is massive damage. Going for the Bulldoze, and this will be a very easy no shield for the opponent. Bulldoze is going to be no shielded, and that just does nothing. Oh my goodness. I really like just letting the Zygarde go here, and that's exactly what Sour Lemon is going to do. Zygarde is on this team to be a damage sponge to try and set up the back 2 Pokemon to sweep. Shadow Palkia gets an energy advantage. In comes Dialga. We're going to see the switch to the Shadow Groudon. Dialga not switching out, and those Mud Shots do so much damage. Just going for the Fire Punch, trying to soften up the Dialga. Dialga I mean, it honestly looks like Groudon, if it wants to, could get a Mud Shot farm down. And judging by the fact that they're not switching, they're probably weak in the back to Groudon. Groudon opting against the farm down, instead just going to go for the Fire Punch, looking to preserve a little bit of HP. In the back is Rhyperior. Rhyperior will be met with the Shadow Precipice Blades, and if they shield this, there's an Aqua Tail with their name on it. They do shield, and it's all over. This is a Shadow Aqua Tail that is double super effective damage. Poor Rhyperior never stood a chance, and we get the screenshot as well as that game is over. All in all, these were some very fun battles, so thank you to Sour Lemon for sending them in. I can't even imagine the amount of raids needed to accumulate the XLs to power up a level 50 Shadow Groudon and a level 50 Shadow Palkia. That is some insane commitment. When it comes to Groudon and Palkia and their shadows and the Master League viability, I do think Palkia Origin still reigns supreme. I think there can be some situations where Shadow Palkia and the extra damage you get from being Shadow can be nice, specifically in terms of fast move pressure, but purely based off the fact that Palkia Origin has Spatial Rend, and Spatial Rend is an unbelievably efficient move, and it's so much cheaper than Draco, I'm definitely going to give the edge to Palkia Origin. As far as Groudon, honestly, I really like it, but I think it's in a bit of a difficult spot at the moment. Due to the Mud Shot rework, it actually really hurts Groudon, as Groudon was very reliant on being able to spam out Precipice Blades. And of course, extra fast move damage is nice, but the Precipice Blades pacing is suddenly slower. So, all in all, more of a fun team than a team for climbing in my view, but many thanks to Sour Lemon for sending it in, as these battles were quite enjoyable. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.